Right, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's evening here in the UK. This is Catania Alvin bringing you the second part of Sir William Cash's extremely important debating points against Mrs. May's deal. Here we go. Right, I'm starting at point 946 to backtrack.
About this because the referendum itself was endorsed by a sovereign act of this Parliament, sovereign act which transferred the decisions to the British people. And the British people made that decision in line with the wishes of the electorate. I'll give way to my old friend.
Grateful, and I'm perfectly clear that whatever the public voted for in the referendum or at the last general election, nobody had a clue they were going to be voting for a withdrawal agreement, anything like the one before the House today. But can I ask him about a matter of good faith? Because I interpreted the Attorney General's remarks to be a suggestion that we should perhaps approve this today in order to satisfy the technical terms of the extension agreed by the 27.
Just look at this. I think is the Attorney General. Watch his face. Think about what is he thinking? What's his attitude of mind as he listens to this debate?
The basis of some kind of a ruse to get an extra extension, even though we haven't actually approved the withdrawal agreement and the political declarations in the terms that we said we would. Is that an act of good faith with our European partners?
An act of good faith. The European partners are like vipers. You don't have acts of faith with vipers.
I very much agree with what my my honourable friend is saying, and I go further and say that the change of gear between the 26th of June, when the Withdrawal Act received royal assent, and the 6th of July, and then the introduction of the White Paper after the Chequers proposals, demonstrated to me bad faith, because it must have been pre-planned while that withdrawal bill was going through, with which I was thoroughly in agreement and gave every conceivable assistance to the government to get it through. And the reality is that because it was only produced 10 days later, you only have to ask the question, how can they write an 80-page white paper without planning it some months in advance? I'll give way to my own.
Exactly. That's why I say in a previous one, or did they want a Brexit?
I'm grateful to my right and wrong, my honourable friend, for giving way, and you know I revere him when it comes to constitutional law. I just wonder, in the course of his argument, I wonder, isn't he slightly making the case that we need to get to the bill, because it is within the bill, and we debate the bill, that we actually then end up being able to decide what are the protections left. And I would love to hear him in the bill, because I will certainly support his amendments when we get to the bill.
That's a very, very good point. Because, and I make this point, and that is why I've been saying to the Attorney General just now, will he give me an assurance, and he didn't answer my question, that if the withdrawal agreement is not approved tonight, are they going to bring in the bill anyway? Because there are a lot of people who are...
There's the Attorney General. Watch his face. And also watch Theresa May.
I'm hearing, as Chairman of the well, I'm very glad to see that the Leader of the House shakes her head, that the withdrawal agreement will not be followed, if it is rejected, by a bill. Is that absolutely crystal clear? I look at the Leader of the House. Is it quite clear? There will be no bill if, in fact, this agreement is rejected. She doesn't answer. Well, that is the point. So what I...
Exactly. Who can trust her?
What I say to the House is this: this European Council meeting, this European Council decision, is yet another example of the manner in which this country, this great country, has again effectively capitulated to the demands of the European Council. That is one of my greatest objections to this motion, as well as all the other things I've mentioned. And it is exactly the same as when the European Scrutiny Committee last March, a whole year ago, made a report saying we should never, ever have accepted the sequencing or, for that matter, the terms of reference laid down by the European Union. We have capitulated. This is not compromise, Mr. Speaker. This has been capitulation. And that is the reason.
Now, look, did you see catch Theresa May's face? That's not a woman of genuineness. She's laughing. Look at all of them. Well, she's looking rather shocked.
Why it is so important that the House recognises this in the vote this evening. Yeah, I will give way to the lady.
Sir William Cash is furious, and quite right too.
Well done, Sylvia.
Thank you indeed, Mr. Speaker. I'm enormously grateful that patience has paid off. Let me take the honourable member back to his remarks about Northern Ireland. May I just gently remind him that the DUP do not speak for the majority of people in Northern Ireland. And may I also reflect the fact that the Prime Minister cares deeply about the United Kingdom. She cares so deeply about the United Kingdom that the Good Friday Belfast Agreement and the consent principle are protected in her withdrawal deal. They're protected in black and white, and therefore the constitutional status of Northern Ireland remains the same. It remains in the hands of the people of Northern Ireland voting in a border.
Go in the hands of Brussels. I'm grateful. I have great respect for the Honourable Lady. I only say this, that we've had this debate before. We do differ about it. I, of course, want to see the Good Friday Agreement retained. It's been a tremendous triumph, and I don't wish in any way to disparage that. What I do say, however, is that there are very, very serious questions about the constitutional status of Northern Ireland as a result of the backstop. And I say this to some of my honourable friends, who themselves may have changed their minds in respect of whether or not they would approve this withdrawal agreement. I will simply say this, that I have heard all of them, good friends of mine, repeatedly objecting to the fact that this backstop is there. We've had the distinguished Attorney General and the distinguished Solicitor General opining on this subject, and we've had some very interesting outcomes. But the reality is that the Northern Ireland backstop is a massive impediment. In fact, it is an insuperable impediment to agreeing this withdrawal agreement. I will give way.
He talks about opting back in to the European Communities Act, which we all know is what will happen in the transition. But there's a key word there, transition. Does he not accept the risk today of defeating this withdrawal agreement is that we will stay in the European Communities Act forever?
No, because there is no suggestion, and I've heard, that the repeal of the 1972 Act would be itself, the repeal of that Act would be repealed. From either side of the House, there is no question about that, and the reality is that because that is an Act of Parliament and set in stone, I do not believe that that will happen, and furthermore, that the consequence of our moving on to the next phases will reinforce that, and that is my view. I can only say that the British people will be incredibly angry, and they will be very devastated if they find that the repeal of the 1972 Act takes place, and that would be a massive breach of faith with the British people. I'll give way. Very good.
I understand he will oppose this motion on the basis that he wants a clean break with the European Union. I understand that. But does he realise he'll be walking through the lobbies with people who are looking for a very, very soft Brexit or no Brexit at all? So one of those parties, either you or they, are going to be very, very disappointed.
Well, I will only say this, with respect to that point, that actually I have witnessed over the last few weeks members of my own party, sadly and tragically, repeatedly going through the lobbies And I even saw the Prime Minister the other day going through the lobbies with the leader of the opposition on a certain motion. What I'm saying to you is that this is because of the enormous issues that are at stake in relation to the question of who governs us. And that is really why this entire debate is so vitally important to our future. And that is why the repeal of the 72 Act is central to that question. I'll give way to...
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend. I particularly appreciate his remarks in respect of Northern Ireland. But the honourable lady, the member for North Down, is precisely right. Will he reflect on the fact that bastions of unionism, such as the Federation of Small Businesses, the CBI, the Ulster Farmers Union and Ulster Chambers of Commerce are all in favour of the withdrawal agreement?
I know that and I've heard it, but so have the DUP themselves. And I'm simply saying, before I give way to the right honourable gentleman, the reality is that they sit here in this House, having been elected themselves on a proposition. This issue, Mr. Speaker, is all about democratic decision-making. It's about the honesty with which we approach it. It's to do with the trust that is inherent in our taking the instructions of the British people in accordance with the Sovereign Referendum Act. I'll give way to the right honourable gentleman.
And the Democratic Unionist Party has never pretended that it represents the majority of everyone in Northern Ireland, but it represents more people than anybody else. The fact of the matter is there's no party in this House, in government in Scotland, Wales or here, that represents a majority. We have the same proportion of the vote as the SNP in Scotland. Let us be very clear. Let us be very clear. As the right honourable gentleman has pointed out, that every single unionist party in Northern Ireland, never mind individual voices or business groups, every single unionist party, the Ulster Unionists, the TUV, the Progressive Unionists, and all unionist parties agree with the position that this is a problem for the union. Let not people pretend that it is otherwise. That is why we have worked very hard with the Prime Minister to try to get those changes to the backstop that would have allowed us to vote on the withdrawal agreement. That is why we backed the Brady Amendment. That is why we worked with her. Sadly, we have not made sufficient progress, but let no one pretend that we don't speak for the Unionists of Northern Ireland.
We agree with every word that the right honourable member has said. This is true. And it is not good enough to talk about our precious union and to damage it. And it is not good enough to say that we will not truly leave the European Union unless we regain control over our laws, which the Prime Minister said in the Lancaster House Agreement. And then for us to arrive at the point where we are politically castrated, precisely because for a number of years we will be put at the mercy of our competitors. That is the key issue. It's not just the question of sovereignty in its own right, it's the practical impact as a result of which we will end up by being put at the mercy of our competitors, for example, in relation to state aids. I think, Mr. Speaker, it is important now for me to end my remarks because as far as I'm concerned, and I'm very glad, I expect all that from this rabble across the road. That doesn't trouble me one bit. I have done my best, Mr. Speaker, over many, many years to ensure the democracy and sovereignty of this House, and I will never give way on that point. For me, this is a matter of principle. The record speaks for itself. I wish I could vote for this withdrawal agreement, but I have to say it comes, for me, down to a simple question of integrity and a matter of principle. And anyone who wants to question me on that matter can do so. But I say to them, I'm doing this for the best of intentions, as a matter of conscience and as a matter of record.
Brilliant. Thank you. Whoopsie-daisy. Sir William Cash, I think, gave an excellent speech, debate, and brought up some very important points, because in that withdrawal agreement, or that deal, is really tying Britain into Europe. God bless. This is Catania Alvin saying bye-bye. Have a wonderful evening, morning, day, signing out from London. Bye-bye.